Hi there, this is Tony from pianotone.ca, and this is my review of the Roland FP-30 intermediate digital piano. It's the second out of four in the FP line from Roland. There's the FP-10, the FP-30, the FP-60, and the FP-90. So let's check it out. So the FP-30 from Roland has 88 fully weighted graded hammer action keys, 5 levels of touch sensitivity, 22 watts for speaker power. There's 35 voices, there's 128 notes of polyphony. For effects, there's 5 levels of ambience, which is basically reverb, and then there's 3 levels of brilliance, which is basically chorus. And for the piano tones only, there's also built-in string, damper, and key off resonance. It also has onboard MIDI recording ability. There's 8 onboard rhythms that you can play along with, and also offers some Bluetooth functionality. And it's also got a very useful app from Roland called Piano Partner 2. So Roland took the approach with the FP line of pianos of really going all out on the quality of the action and also the quality of the sound engine. Both the FP-10 and the FP-30 actually have the same action and sound engine as the FP-60, which is about twice the price of the FP-30. So you're getting a very high-end action in kind of an entry to mid-range level instrument. Now the PHA-4 action from Roland is a triple sensor action. Most of the competitors in this price range are going to have dual sensors, so it's a much more realistic feel when you're playing it. It also has escapement, which is the feel of the hammer as it leaves the strings on an acoustic piano. And they didn't stop there either. They've also got simulated ebony and ivory key tops, which actually really do make a big difference in keeping your fingers from slipping while you play when you compare it to the shiny plasticky keys you find on a lot of, in particular, entry-level digital pianos. Now with the weighting, something else that makes this quite a bit more realistic is there's actually a separate weight for each key. A lot of the entry-level digital pianos that are graded are actually kind of graded in chunks, so they'll have one weighting in this section, one weighting in this section, etc. as you move up. With Roland FP-10 and the FP-30, you've got individual weightings for each one of the keys. So for voices, Roland has a technology called the Supernatural sound modeling. They actually use it on other instruments as well as their digital pianos. It's actually pretty interesting. If you want to learn more about it, definitely Google it and read up on it. But suffice it to say, from my experience with this piano, it has very full sound, especially on the piano tones. It just seems like there's a little bit more going on. The decays seem to be a little more natural sounding than the Yamahas that I've tried out, and I love their sounds as well. The Yamahas do tend, in my opinion, and if you do your research on the internet, you'll probably have other people saying this as well. Yamahas tend to be a little bit brighter, and the Rolands tend to be a little bit maybe deeper and fuller in the piano sounds. And again, just like the key bed, it's very personal. So some people may like one or the other, and neither one of them is wrong. They're just a little bit different. I'm an ex-bass player, and I really like deep sounds, and I really like the fullness of the piano sounds on the FP-30. So there are 35 voices on the Roland FP-30. You can access them on board with these buttons using some button combinations. You can imagine that given the high-end action and sound engine that the Roland FP-30 has, that they've maybe kept the price down a little bit by not having a display and a huge amount of user interface up here. So you do have the situation where you have to hold down a function key of some sort and then look up in the manual which one of these keys to press. There's actually 3 sections. There's piano, electric piano, and then other. And they do reuse the same batch of keys on the keyboard. So it will take some getting used to remember which ones are which, and you'll have the manual all around. What is going to make your life quite a bit easier is the Roland Piano Partner 2 app. I'm actually going to go through the app in a lot more detail later on in the review. So you'll see me using it so that I don't have to bother looking up the key combinations, but I will explain what I'm doing with it later on. So I'm not going to demo all of the different voices, but I'm going to go through some of the piano voices and then some of the other common ones that might be the bread and butter voices. So Roland has a lot of the common features built into the FP-30 that you'll find on lots of digital pianos, like splitting the keyboard into two halves. We have one voice on one side and one voice on the other. The default for that is actually pretty cool. It's a bass and cymbal in the left and then the piano on the right. So that's kind of cool. And the dual, which is layering, it will default to piano and strings. Now, one of the issues with the way that the interface works with the onboard buttons is because you have these three categories, piano, electric piano, and other, for both the split and the dual / layering, you're not going to be able to choose two voices from within the same category if you're just using the buttons on the piano itself. So for example, if I wanted to have strings and harp on top of each other, which are both in the other section, I can do that with the app, but I can't do that with the piano. So now the twin piano is actually kind of neat. Like I was mentioning before, this is typically used for an instructor and student situation. So you're splitting the piano in half. So you've got a C here, and it's the same C up there. One thing that's cool though is this is set to pair. If I set it to individual, you can see that's just coming out of the left speaker. I'm not sure if you can tell. However you're listening to this, if you got headphones on, you'll be able to tell. And that's just coming out of the right. And that's gonna work for the onboard speakers as well. And there are also 2 headphone jacks, which I'll get to a little bit later. So there's a separate headphone jack for each player. Okay, so for the effects, I was mentioning before, there's 5 levels of ambience, which is basically reverb, and then 3 levels of brilliance, which is basically chorus. So I'm going to go through those really quick. I'm just going to use the default piano sound. So I'm going to turn both the effects off. I'll add 1 level of ambience. 2 levels of ambience. And level 3. So you can really start to hear the ringing there. And cranked up to level 4. So I'm going to turn the ambience off, and I'm just going to play without any effects again. Now I'm going to add 1 to the brilliance, which is chorus. And then the maximum chorus. And just for fun, let's crank up the ambience and the chorus to their max. Let's reset that to where it was. And there's also a lot of the other common, there's a metronome function. I'm not going to bother demonstrating that. It's pretty much the same as metronomes you'll find on any digital piano. You can set different speeds, time signatures, so you hear a chime on a different beat, etc. And there's a nice easy transposition function in here as well. You can also transpose and work the metronome on the piano too. Okay, the FP-30 also has rhythms built in, and there's kind of 2 types of rhythms on this piano. There's the ones that are on board the piano, which don't have any accompaniment options, and then there's a whole bunch of extra rhythms that you have within the app that you can choose to have just drums or accompaniment on. And you can also do stuff like sync start, so it starts when you're playing and that type of thing. So for the onboard rhythms, you're going to be using a function key to access those. And then you can play along. And you can adjust the speed, etc. And then the onboard rhythms. So you can hear the backing track in there as well, and you can't see that, but it says C major up here, which is what I was just playing. So then I can play along. And you can hear them following me along. One issue I did notice with that though is it doesn't detect for the chord changes if I'm just playing. I often tend to play just an octave with my left hand, and it won't detect a chord change unless I play a full chord. So unless I add in something that signifies that not as just being the octaves. So for example, so I'm on C major right now. If I go down here and play an F octave, you can hear it's not changing. But if I add in something that defines that as an F chord, now it's changed. So not the end of the world, but just something to be aware of. And then you can also do things like have a sync start so that it'll start as soon as I start playing. So this can be lots of fun, and there's a whole bunch of different rhythms that are built into the app. So one thing I did notice that I did want to mention is with the split function, where you have, let's say, bass in the left hand and piano or whatever in the right, and you want to use your rhythms, That works fine with the onboard rhythms that are built into the piano, so if you're accessing them with the buttons. If you're using the rhythms that are built into the app, then the split function will not work. So for example, you can, here I've got notes down there. If I hit split, just going to make just the drums there so you can hear. Nothing's going on down here. You can't hear anything on the left hand. If I turn the split function off, now you can. So, don't know why that is. Just thought I would mention it because I did catch that. Okay, so for connectivity, there's a USB MIDI port in the back. That's how I've got my piano connected to the tablet right now. You can also use Bluetooth for that as well, to connect to a Bluetooth-enabled device. So you can transmit MIDI data over either Bluetooth or that cable. So you can I can run GarageBand and record MIDI files, that type of thing. Should be emphasized that you cannot transmit audio over that over Bluetooth or with that jack. Some people assume that because this is Bluetooth enabled that you can stream audio from a device into the Roland FP-30 speakers. You cannot do that. It's just MIDI data that goes over Bluetooth. There's also a USB flash drive in the back of the FP-30. That would be your only option for anything that would function like an audio in, but it is for WAV files only. And I did try to convert some MP3s and M4As from my music library into WAV files, and I wasn't able to get it to work, but I'm assuming that's some type of versioning of the WAV file that I'm creating or something. I didn't spend too much time on it, but if you have the properly formatted WAV files, you should be able to play them from a USB flash drive. So that would be an option for an audio in. The other thing that you can use the flash drive for is the recorder on the Piano Partner app. If you record something as MIDI into your FP-30, you can then move it onto the flash drive so that you can then do whatever you want with it from there. There's also a 1/4-inch generic sustain pedal jack in the back, and there's also an extra jack for the Roland triple pedal unit that you can get that's compatible with the Roland FP-30. And there's 2 headphone ports in the front, which is nice and convenient. There's actually also an 1/8 inch and a 1/4 inch, so you don't need an adapter regardless of what kind of headphones you have. And there are no line-out jacks, but as Roland's documentation says, the headphone jacks are configured to be perfectly usable as audio outputs. That is actually how you're hearing the piano in my videos. I've got a 1/4 inch stereo cable plugged into the 1/4 inch headphone jack that splits into 2 1/4 inch mono signals that are going into my audio interface. So that's how you're hearing the recordings that I'm doing, and it sounds just fine to me. Okay, the Piano Partner 2 app is free from Roland. You can connect to it with your USB MIDI port on your piano, like I'm doing, or you can connect to it with Bluetooth. There is one quick issue with the Bluetooth configuration that I thought I would mention. If you're having trouble connecting, if you go to settings on your device and go to Bluetooth, if you see the FP-30 listed there, highlight it and then choose to forget this device. That's going to make your life easier. Then when you go back into your Piano Partner, you can go up to the settings, and then you're going to be able to see the device there and pair it within Piano Partner. And that's going to work really well. So the first section in Piano Partner is the songs section. So if I go in here, I can choose one of the built-in songs on the device. So I will choose Nutcracker, and then I can go to the music score section. You're actually going to see the score here. Now before I start playing it, I'm just going to mention you can mute the left hand and or the right hand. So if you want to learn one part at a time, you can, and then you can play along with it. And you can see the score moves along, so you can follow along. Now the rhythm section, as I was mentioning before when I went over this just with the onboard rhythms, is you've got quite a few different rhythms to choose from. There's 21 different ones with 2 variations. I guess there's 42. And you can do things like set up an autofill, set up a sync start, change the tempo. I just want the drums, or I want the backing accompaniment, etc. So if I hit autofill, sync start, and go to slow blues. Etc. So this can be tons of fun. And flashcards is basically kind of a testing app where you can listen to sounds or read notations, and then it's kind of like a test. You get graded on it. So there's my my reference note C. So I have to guess what that is. Ooh, I guessed wrong. Try a lower note. There it is. And then you keep going through, and you get you're basically testing your ability to hear the notes. And then you can go into read notations. Same idea, except you're going to be getting tested with the notation. So I need to figure out what note that is. So maybe that's a C. No, that's wrong. Looks like it's an A. So, and then I go on to the next one. Okay, so the remote controller, that's the area that I'm in the most often. That's going to be basically taking the place of controlling the piano with the buttons. You can use the app instead. So you've got the tone categories. These match the tone button categories on your piano. So there's piano, electric piano, and other. So you can use that to choose your tones. And it's also where you go and do set up the split if you want to split the keyboard. So if the default split is that bass and cymbal in the right and piano on the other side. And you can change the split point, which is cool. So that's going to be changing where the split happens on the keyboard. You can also change the volume balance between the two voices. Same idea on dual, which is layering. You can choose your two voices, and then you can change the volume balance between the two of them. And then on twin piano, which is the splitting the keyboard in half with the same octave on either side, that's where you can choose to pair, which is basically everybody hears everything from either side, or you can choose individual, which is where the person on the left hears their play coming out of the left speaker, and the person on the right hears it coming out of the right. So that's very cool. And settings, that's where you go in to choose, you can transpose keys, which is great for us beginner piano players. And then you can set the ambience and the brilliance, so the reverb and the chorus. You've also got a little bit of a finer control over the volume in here than you do with the buttons, because instead of a dial on the piano itself, there's these buttons down here. So you have a finer control over the volume if you like. And you can also set the key touch, so the touch sensitivity. There's actually 5 settings, and then fixed, which is off, which I don't think anybody's ever about to use. But so you've got a lot of options there. And you can also even tune the instrument, fine tune it if you're tuning to like an acoustic instrument or something that's slightly off tune with you. Then you can actually tune your piano to it. And there's a metronome setting, which is pretty common on digital pianos. So right now it's set to 3/4 time. You can hear the chime coming in. So I can change that to 4/4 time and change the tempo, etc. So pretty standard features for a metronome. Then the recorder, I can go in and record something. And then play it back very quickly. Now that gets recorded as MIDI. That is your only option for recording. You can't record as audio. You can, however, record that onto the piano and then move it off the piano onto a flash drive, a USB flash drive that's plugged into the back. The last thing on the Piano Partner 2 app is the diary. Didn't spend too much time on that, but basically the diary actually tracks what you've done on the piano, what you play, how you play, are you hitting the keys too hard, that type of thing. It'll tell you how many notes you've played over a time period, that type of thing. So if you're interested in something like that, you can actually log all of your activity on your piano. So things that I wish the Roland FP-30 had. I wish it had a line in or an audio interface in. Some people do assume that the fact that there's Bluetooth capability allows you to stream music or whatever from your device into the piano speakers, but that's not the case. There's no audio. All the Bluetooth does is transmit MIDI data back and forth. So that would be handy. And the flash drive, as I mentioned, is supposed to be able to play WAV files through the piano. I wasn't able to get that to work, but I didn't spend too much time trying to play with that. So assuming that works, so that is an option for some type of an audio in for you. I wish the speakers were upward facing, or that there were some tweeters upward facing or something, because on my table, I pretty much have to modify my table to get the speakers to function. That being said, I rarely have my speakers turned on anyways, so if I was ever to use the speakers, it would be on an X stand playing somewhere that's not at home. The other thing I wish that the FP-30 had were the 1/4-inch line-out jacks. It does seem to sound perfectly fine, as Roland said it would, through the headphone jack with the proper type of splitter cable, but the extra line-out jacks would be a nice add-on. So verdict and other choices. Do I recommend this piano? Absolutely. But I do recommend trying out the action and listening to the sounds and comparing them to other competitors. Because as I mentioned in the review, it is very personal. Some people love this action and love these sounds. Some people not so much, and they prefer the competitors. So I think they're fantastic, and love playing the PHA-4 action, and I love the deep Roland sounds, but you may not. So make sure you check that out on your own in person. So the main competitor for the FP-30 is the Yamaha 125, which is another piano that I think is fantastic. The Roland is about 15% or so more expensive than the Yamaha, and they do have some pretty big differences between the two of them, and it just might depend on what's a better fit for you. The speakers are quite a bit more powerful in the FP-30. I personally think the action is better, and I personally think that the sounds are fuller and better. The Yamaha sounds are brighter. The Yamaha might have a bit of a better user interface. You can control a little more, a few more things a little easier on the piano than as opposed to relying on the app, like you might be doing with the Roland. And another option to the FP-30 is the FP-10, which has the same action and the same sound engine, just fewer onboard sounds and no rhythms and smaller speakers. So depending on your needs and your situation, that might be an option for you as well, because it's actually cheaper than the Yamaha. And the other thing to mention with the FP-10 is if you're using the Piano Partner app, then you actually get access to all the same sounds that you get on the FP-30. So that's pretty much it for my review on the Roland FP-30. Again, highly recommend this piano. I think it's awesome. And happy piano shopping. Thanks.